Hello everyone and welcome to this year's complete frog room tour. As some of you may have seen in my previous video, I recently moved into this apartment with all of my animals, which was quite an interesting process, but luckily most things went according to plan and there weren't any issues during the move. I'm really enjoying the new place so far, since I have a much better overview of all of my animals. It's much more organized and easier to enjoy and take care of. But without further ado, let's get into the tour. You're watching Tropical Tutorials, my name is Manuel and welcome to my frog room. Before getting into the tank by tank tour, I'm going to start with a quick overview of the whole apartment, or at least the main room. The entire setup is based around these two racks with enclosures, with a sofa and an armchair situated around them. Even more unusual is the fact that I have placed my desk right behind the sofa to give me an excellent view from there as well. This is a rather unusual room design, but it's extremely important to me that I get to properly enjoy my animals from the places where I spend the most time. Besides the usual kitchen and dinner table, something noteworthy to point out is this massive Monstera deliciosa. I gave this plant as a small cutting to my sister about 5 years ago, and she evidently took care of it well, but couldn't bring it with her to her new apartment, so it got to stay here when I moved into her previous apartment, which is this one. The Monstera is currently also serving as a Christmas tree. Something else that really adds to the vibe of the room is this big jungle-style lamp. If you turn it on in the evening when the lights are off, it looks like the walls are all striped. Now let's get into the vivariums. First we have what is currently the most boring shelf of them all. This rack is usually filled to the brim with froglets, but now 5 of these 6 tanks are completely empty, as I've been very busy and haven't bothered raising any tadpoles for the past few months. There are some Ranitomea variabilis French Guiana holdbacks from last year that I'm raising in the top middle tank. That vivarium was insanely overgrown for a long time and recently got a major trim. I will try to insert some old footage from a previous collection tour of how this tank used to look before, so you can compare it to its current state. To the left of these tanks, I also have 2 plastic bins that have occasionally been used for housing frogs temporarily, but are currently empty. Now to the slightly more interesting tanks. This shelf contains 6 tanks which are 30 by 50 by 40 centimeters or 12 by 20 by 16 inches. This is in the smaller range for dart frogs, but for pairs or trios of thumbnail dart frogs or semi-thumbnails, I think they work fine, considering that there is a lot of depth in these tanks, so you can scape them in an optimal way to make the frogs feel secure and utilize the setup to the fullest extent. The first tank houses a few Epipodobetes anthonii riodaule. I used to keep a lot more of these frogs, but I lowered the number substantially when I moved into the apartment, both to make room for other frogs in my larger tanks and to slightly reduce the noise level now that I actually have neighbors. I believe I have 1 male and 3 females here. I usually say that this is the best beginner dart frog species of them all, and they tend to be very active and bold. Just a very fun species to keep in general. But their call is a lot louder than most other dart frog species. Next to them is a tank that is empty and still growing in. I will most likely use this tank for froglets or for a secondary pair of some other dart frog species that I already have in my collection. In the next row I keep a trio of Ranitomea reticulata. This is my favorite Ranitomea species, as they are just so unbelievably beautiful when you see their metallic red coloration in person. And yes, the frog that's in my profile picture is a part of this trio. 2 of these are males that I've had in a different tank for a very long time with no female company, but when I finally found a probable female for sale recently, I decided to move them all into this enclosure. This is definitely one of the most terrestrial Ranitomea species that will spend plenty of time in the leaf litter, but they do climb a lot too, of course. Next to them we have some new frogs that you haven't seen on the channel before, which I bought at the previous Swedish Frog Day in Gothenburg. These are 2 Ranitomea imitator Varadero. Ranitomea imitator is a very special frog and a favorite for many Ranitomea keepers, and so far I can certainly see why, even though I'm not quite ready to put them at the number 1 spot just yet, before I have even bred them. Despite being young, they are quite outgoing, and this particular locale has extremely variable patterns, which is one of the reasons I wanted them. I haven't heard any calling, so they might be 2 females, but maybe I'm just suffering from a lack of patience as they are still fairly young. Below them we have my favorite frogs in the entire collection. This is a trio of Ophaga pumilio punta laurel, and they are just incredible frogs. They are very beautiful, loud, outgoing and bold, and their breeding behavior is of course great since I don't have to do anything. I'm happy keeping Ranitomeas in this tank size, but my Ophagas are way more active, so I'm going to upgrade them as soon as I can. More on that later in the tour. In my previous collection tour, I only had 2 females of this species and they were rather shy. But last spring I finally found a male for them, and they have all been far more active since he was introduced. In my experience, it's very common that frogs are very shy and inactive when you only have one gender, but when you get a breeding pair or group going, there will be a lot more action in the tank. Within 3 months of introducing the male, I had a froglet on land, but I haven't seen that froglet for quite a long time, so I don't think it made it long term. The bromeliads in this enclosure haven't been doing that well, and I was honestly shocked that they managed to raise a single tadpole in this tank in the first place. But their next tank will be more optimized for breeding. Next to them, we have my second enclosure housing Ranitomea reticulata, or maybe I should say first, since this pair has been going for a lot longer than the trio in the other tank. 2 years ago, I was stuck with 3 males and got a juvenile which turned out to be a female, just as I had hoped. Eventually, about a year ago, she was old enough to breed, so I moved her into this tank with one of my males. They did produce many clutches, but at the start many of these clutches went bad. I also eventually got more lazy with looking for and pulling the eggs out of the tank as I got busy with other things in life. I did successfully raise one froglet though, and my ambition is to start putting a bit more effort into finding and raising their eggs again from now. The boldness of this species really does vary from month to month, it would seem. At the time of recording this, I haven't seen either of these 2 individuals for a few weeks, though to be fair I haven't been looking too extensively. But other times of the year you can see them all the time. I think their occasional extreme shyness is one of the reasons this species is a horrible beginner frog. But the main reason is that they have a much higher mortality rate than most Ranitomeas, as they can often simply decide to lose weight and die for seemingly no reason. Even many experienced keepers struggle with this species a lot more than with others, myself in the past included, even though there are of course also keepers who get it all right with no issues. Below them I have some tarantulas, but I will get back to them later in the tour. Moving on to the next shelf, we have a tank that houses a mourning gecko and a Dendrobates tinctorius assyrius. I used to have a pair of assyrius, but the female actually passed away a few months ago. This is the only time I have ever lost an adult frog that's not a Ranitomea in my 6.5 years in the hobby, so I guess my overall track record is pretty good, but it does feel a bit bad as it was definitely premature. I haven't been too keen on buying a new female of this species, because while they are lovely, I feel like I want to focus mainly on breeding other species that are a bit less common. For now, this male is at least going to stay with me as a display frog. The mourning gecko is doing well, and there are quite a few eggs in there that should hatch soon. Below them is one of my most beautiful tanks with one of my favorite larger frog species. This is where I keep my group of Dendrobates leucomelas Guyana banded. It started with a pair that were my very first start frogs back in 2019, but I have since expanded the group with a few really cool looking holdback froglets with unique patterns. There are currently 5 frogs in here, and I'm definitely not going to add more individuals to this tank size. They don't always work in groups as well as for example Phyllobates or Epipodobates, but usually still much better than for example Dendrobates tinctorius. Male heavy or balanced groups are to be preferred, as the females are the potential troublemakers. Now it's time to talk about tarantulas for a bit. If you really hate spiders or just don't care about them, you can skip to this timestamp, but I honestly think they are incredibly fascinating and often misunderstood creatures. I used to keep plenty of tarantulas and other invertebrates around 2017 to 2019, and at my peak I had over 50 tarantulas, but I heavily downsized my tarantula collection when I got into dart frogs. At this point, I still keep a few display tanks with some of my favorite tarantula species, and this way of keeping tarantulas is something that I enjoy much more than keeping dozens of dirt jars and plastic tubs. To the left I have 2 Monocenthropus balfouri females, or the Socotra Island blue baboon tarantula. This is one of the very few tarantula species that can live communally in groups, though only 2 of my 3 females were alive when I rehoused them a few months ago, so there has been some dirty play done in this group. In the middle, I keep my Chromatopelma cyanopubescens female, also known as the green bottle blue tarantula. This tarantula is the oldest in my collection, being almost 10 years old at this point. As a young spider, she was very fast and ferocious, but now she is a calm and docile old lady and usually even lets the roaches live when I try to feed her. This is the only tarantula in my collection that I feel confident handling, but she prefers being left alone, of course. To the right of her, I keep a Psalmopoeus irminia female, or the Venezuelan sun tiger tarantula. The Psalmopoeus genus has always been my favorite among the arboreal tarantulas, and she is surprisingly active and likes to show herself off. This species is usually extremely defensive and likes to give threat postures, and this girl can definitely have her mood swings, but she is honestly fairly calm most of the time. I guess she simply gets to live a calm and stress-free life here. Next, we have my first tarantula, an Acanthoscurria geniculata female named Selma. I got her as a tiny spiderling back in 2017, and it truly is incredible to have seen her entire journey since then. This is such a stunning display species with a massive appetite. I usually feed her when I have guests over, and she never disappoints. You saw all of these tarantulas in my previous collection tour, but I actually have one new spider too. This is a Theraphosa sturmi spiderling, or the Burgundy Goliath bird-eater tarantula. This little guy will grow to become the largest tarantula in the world, and they do grow fast, but he still has quite a bit to go, as you can see. I have had 3 Theraphosas in the past, and it has been my favorite tarantula genus for a very long time. It's hard to describe, but something about their huge size and unique appearance always fascinated me. While I'm talking about invertebrates, I might as well show you some of my feeder animals. The tarantulas and occasionally my crested gecko are fed with dubia roaches, which I keep in a plastic enclosure down here next to my misting system reservoir. I also keep 2 springtail cultures on coconut fiber with cork bark pieces that I feed and mist on top of. You can easily harvest the springtails the next day by shaking the cork bark piece in a container. I also culture both small and large fruit flies, Drosophila melanogaster and Drosophila hydei, but they are in a closet so you don't have to see them. Now it's finally time to get to my largest enclosures. This is a custom-made aluminum rack housing some Exoterra vivariums, with the tanks on the lower shelf being 90 cm or 36 inches tall, and the upper shelf being 60 cm or 24 inches tall. Then you can guess the width of each enclosure based on that. The enclosure in the top left is currently kind of empty. There is a reason I say kind of, and it's a bit complicated, but I'll get back to that soon. Anyways, the tank itself does look pretty good with the moss growth on the branches and walls, but there is a lot of unused space in the back. The reason is that I killed the 2 bromeliads that were intended to fill out that space, but I recently got a new one that I'm hoping will do better. I used to have nothing but filter foam and leaf litter as a substrate in this tank, but I have since added a layer of pine bark on top of the foam, since that helps the humidity balance to stay even within the foam without me having to fill it up completely with water. Before, the top few centimeters of the foam would become completely dry, which is not what I wanted. I have talked about my first frogs and first spiders earlier, but my very first exotic pet overall was this crested gecko named Francelina. When my sister was 8 years old, she got a pet rabbit, so I of course also wanted a pet when I was the same age to make it equal. Only my hobby would spiral out of control slightly more than hers. At first I wanted a snake, but I wasn't allowed to keep dead mice in the freezer, so I ended up with a crested gecko instead after months of researching with my dad. And in retrospect, I'm very happy about that. I am realizing that there's nothing stopping me from owning a snake anymore now that I have my own apartment, but I really don't feel any urge to get one whatsoever. Anyways, enough storytelling. I got Francelina in January of 2015, almost 11 years ago. Time really flies away, huh? She is getting old, but I'm hoping for many more years with her. Next to this enclosure is an empty slot, which will of course be filled out with another enclosure eventually. I can't wait to see how this rack will look when it's complete. Below that I keep my Ranitmea sirensis contamina. I used to house 4 of them in the kind of empty tank that I showed you earlier, but they had been completely quiet for about 2 years, so I was starting to think I had 4 females, and bought 2 more in hopes of getting a male. When I bought these 2, I decided to move them all into this tank along with the new ones, but when I tore down their old tank, I could only find 2 from my original group of 4. After about an hour, I gave up and accepted that 2 of them had probably died in my care for some reason, which of course felt bad. I stopped feeding and misting that tank for a month, and then one day I saw a little guy jumping around perfectly happy and healthy, and a few weeks later I saw both of the 2 lost frogs at once. So they were apparently alive, just really good at hiding. However, I'm not making a lot of progress on catching them at the moment. I tried to trick them with one of these bottle traps filled with springtails, but they didn't fall for that one. The tank in the top left is my next project, which I haven't started working on yet, but I will most likely turn that into a video. I'm planning to move my trio of Uphaga Pumilio Punta Laurel into this massive tank once I'm done, rather than buying new frogs for it, as I think it will be incredible to see them in this large space. The final tank in my frog room is also my largest one. It is slowly but surely getting more and more grown in with every month that passes, and I'm quite happy with how it's turning out. The setup process of this entire vivarium can be seen in my 4-part series Vivarium Rebirth here on the channel from the summer of 2024, which includes how I created a tree from blankets drenched in cement slurry, and how I made a ridiculously simple fake rock wall out of a material called hypertufa. Since the last time you saw this enclosure, I have moved my Epipodobetes out of the tank, and instead I have replaced them with my lovely Phyllobetes vittatus, one of my all-time favorite dart frog species. There are also 2 little Ranitomea variabilis French Guiana females living in here with them. Keeping different dart frog species together is something quite controversial for many good reasons, and it should not be attempted unless you know what you're doing. But I have a video specifically dedicated to this topic if you want a more comprehensive answer. Anyways, all the frogs in here are doing well, and it's actually quite interesting to get to see this setup from a higher angle than I used to at my parents' house, since the enclosure is much closer to the ground now than before. That was it for my complete collection tour. These past few months, I've been taking a part-time university class called Filmic Expression, which has taken up a great deal of my free time that would otherwise be spent making YouTube videos. However, now I'm done with that course, so maybe there will be more videos this spring if I can find the motivation and time. With all of that said, thank you for watching this collection tour. If you enjoyed it, it would mean the world to me if you could consider subscribing to the channel, giving the video a like and sharing it with a couple of friends. It's completely free and it's a great way for you to support what I do. On this channel, I upload plenty of tutorials aimed towards beginners in the poison dart frog and vivarium hobby, which you might find helpful. Feel free to also leave a comment down below to share your thoughts on the new animal room, or let me know how your collection has developed in 2025. I read all the comments on the channel and try to respond to any questions you might have, as it's always wonderful to hear from you guys. If you want to see more of my animal room, check out my Instagram page at gecko_geek06. I also have a Discord server, which you can check out in the description. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.